Okay, last lesson we talked about fractions. Now we're going to talk about decimals, which are closely related but different. So, what's a decimal? Decimal comes from the Latin word decum, meaning 10. And that might give you some indication, it might not. What happens is decimals symbolize a part of a whole, like a fraction, but they do it in a different way. They have a decimal point, that little period, and then numbers after that. And that indicates a portion of a whole, or one. So, what is a quarter as a decimal representation of a dollar? How about as a fraction, as a percentage? How would we depict that? I want you to think about that for a moment. Okay, a quarter is $0.25 in decimal. It would be 1/4 of a dollar as a fraction, or 25% of a dollar as a percentage. Now here's a little infographic about decimals. I want you to take a close look at this. The decimal point, you'll see right in the middle to the left is the whole number, to the right is the portion of 1 unit. Everything to the right of the decimal point is a part of 1 unit, just one. It's an amount that's representative of part of 1, just 1. So 863.267, if we round that down, it would be 863, and 0.267 is less than 0.5, so it's less than half, so it would round down. If we were rounding up, the next number would be 864. But anything after the decimal is going to be between two numbers. It's between 863 and 864. Underneath it, we have the nomenclature, the names of what we call the various places. Okay, just as you know the ones, tens, and hundreds on the left side, on the right side of the decimal point are the tenths, the hundredths, thousandths. Be mindful of the TH. They might trip you up a little bit with that on the exam, so you do have to remember when there's a TH, like tenths, hundredths, thousandths, that's a decimal. Okay, to the right of the decimal. Now, when you add a 0 to the right of the decimal, it doesn't affect its value. I give you an example below. 0.5 is equal to 0.50, which is equal to 0.5000. So adding any zeros to the right of a number to the right of the decimal point doesn't change the value. Adding a 0 to the left of, in front of the decimal point, but after the decimal has the effect of dividing by 10. So again, if you add a 0 in front of the decimal number, but after the decimal point, it has the effect of dividing by 10. So if you take 0.5, add a 0 in front of 0.5 and get 0.05, it's the same as dividing 0.5 by 10. If you take 0.7 and add a 0 in front of it and it's 0.07, it's the same as dividing it by 10. 10,000% certain. There's a popular TV show that often has guests that claim they're 10,000% certain, 1,000,000% certain, 100,000% certain. That's wrong. Percentages only go up to 100%, which is decimal 1.0. A percent is a decimal that's been shifted over 2 places. So 0.7 or 0.70 equals 70%. This is important. 0.9, 90%. And remember what we said about zeros to the right of the decimal point. If it's after the number, has no impact. Percentages are always out of 100. Again, just to give you a brief overview, when we were talking about decimals and percentages, when I say the percentages are always out of 100, assume that every number goes to the hundredths place. Okay? So if we had 0.267, let's cover the left-hand side of that. 0.267 would be about 27%. Okay, so we're going to do some reinforcement of percentages. Here's a problem. A football league has teams that play 16 games. It takes a minimum of 11 victories to qualify for the division playoffs, or else it goes to the wild card. A team won 50% of the first 6 games and 90% of the latter 10 games. How would you figure out how many games they won in total? How many was it? Again, you can pause this at any time by pressing the spacebar button. You may want to do that and take some time out to solve this problem. It may take you a little bit. And then in a second or two, I'm going to reveal the answer. So you may want to press spacebar and work this out on your own. I'll give you 1 moment to do that. Okay, so we're back. You should have worked it out. We're going to go over the answer. Okay, there's 16 games. 50% of the first 9, 90% of the second 10 games. 50% is the same as 0.5. 90% is the same as 0.9. We're going to plug in the numbers. 0.5 times 6 plus 0.9 times 10. So we're going to multiply. 6 times 0.5 is 3. 1/2 of 6 is 3. 0.9 times 10, you multiply 10 times 0.9, and you come up with 9, and that's 12 games won in total. 12 is more than the minimum of 11, so they would not be ruled ineligible on that basis, and if they were the winner as stated, they would be eligible. The question didn't ask us this, though, so don't waste time. Remember what we said before about irrelevant information. You got to read the questions. Okay, rounding. We talked a little bit about this before. We're going to talk a little more about it. So you eliminate to the right of the place rounded. If it's greater than or equal to 5, you go up. If it's less than 5, it remains the same. So rounding to the nearest thousand, look at that number, 15,263. The nearest thousand is 16,000 rounded up. Rounded to the nearest hundred, 143,521 would be 143,500. Round to the nearest tenth would be on 5.2345875. Tenth, not 10, would be 5.2, because 3, which follows after 2, is less than 5. Okay, just as on the left side of the decimal, you have tens, hundreds, thousands. You have tenths, hundreds, thousands on the opposite direction. When I say shift over 2 places, I mean move the decimal point to the right 2 places. Okay? 0.20 equals 20%, so you're moving it over 2 places. Converting decimals to fractions. Think of a decimal as being out of 10 or 100, 100 usually for the exam. To convert any decimal to a fraction, make sure it has the tenths and the hundredths place, and then put it over 100. That's a really easy way. If there's no hundredths, add a 0 on the right. So 0.85 equals 85 over 100, and 0.7 is 70 over 100. Remember to reduce. So 70 over 100 equals 7 over 10. Remember, you can reduce by multiplying or dividing both parts. To convert a fraction to a decimal, you can simply divide the numerator, the top, by the denominator, the bottom. So to convert 3/4, divide 4 by 3 using long division. Remember to keep track of the decimals like we said earlier in the lesson. Okay, so you're dividing 4 into 3. The result will be 0.75. Now that we can convert fractions and decimals back and forth, we should be able to order them. One trick is to approximate, which is less accurate but may save time. This may involve rounding or other techniques. I know 51 out of 100 is approximately 1/2, since I know 50 out of 100 equals 1/2. Take a minute and put the following in order. 5/8, 0.1, 93 out of 100, 0.5, 2/3, 0.05. Remember, you can press spacebar to pause the video, and I'll give you a moment to do that, to solve that, and then we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, we're back. Let's look over the solution. Okay, the answer is 0.05, 0.1, 0.5, 5/8, 2/3, 93 out of 100. We can approximate most of those. That's what I did. If you didn't know, is 5/8 or 2/3 was larger, what's one way you could figure that out? You could visualize the cake. You could also divide. 5/8 equals 0.625 and 2/3 equals 0.66. Remember, fractions must have the same denominator to be added or subtracted. Okay, and we're done for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.